Hi there. This is a quick little rundown for those of you who can't make it to campus for a library introduction. And it's something that one of the librarians pointed to me, and I think it's a good way to go through and evaluate your sources so you can avoid, just having sources that are not academically appropriate or just appropriate in general, and you can use this test to um, to really evaluate any kind of material from a website to printed publication. These are just good questions to ask yourself. So as a set of evaluation criteria, it is called the CRAAP test. And yes, you heard that right, the CRAAP test, but it's spelled C-R-A-A-P because there's two A's in this CRAAP. And I'm assuming that the acronym is so you can avoid having any crappy sources in your work. So the first thing, well, I'll give you a quick rundown actually. The C is currency, R is relevance, A is authority, another A is accuracy, and P is purpose. So CRAAP. So currency is essentially about the timeliness of the information. When was it published, posted, that sort of thing. Has it been revised or updated? That, just is it new? Is it old? The question there is not so much generally newer is better or old is bad, but does your topic require new information? Is old information okay? And really that just depends on the topic itself. Sometimes when you're writing about, let's say, Shakespeare, there will be a lot of older information and very little is currently happening in Shakespeare studies that you need to be on the cutting edge, except I do believe there's a possibility of a new play of his has been discovered, but hasn't been getting a lot of play. So depending upon what you're writing about, if you're writing about his older plays or the publications of his sonnets and so on, old information can be okay. So again, it just depends on what it is you're writing about, and whether you need new information, whether you need to be out in front, that sort of thing. For instance, students who are writing maybe about same-sex marriage, drug legalization, that sort of thing. Somebody, because just the other day, 2 days ago, Ireland voted to legalize same-sex marriage. That would be, current information to include. So, it just depends always. With our topic, it's hard to say, but you don't want to get bogged down in old information. So, a rule of thumb is no more than 10 years old. And so see how that applies to what you're doing, and it may or may not work. So that is C for currency. We are on to R for relevance, and excuse me, essentially the importance of the information for your needs. Does it relate to your topic? Does it answer your questions? Can you determine the intended audience? There's that question again. Is the information appropriate for your audience and your purpose? And also, have you looked at a number of other sources? We can't just go out and grab the first source and make sure that's going to be okay. And the other question is, would you be comfortable citing this source in your research paper? So generally speaking, looking at websites, sites that are never, well, this kind of goes more to the next question. But you never want to cite an about.com, a dictionary.com, a wikipedia.org, those sorts of things. But with Wikipedia in particular, there are always sources at the bottom of the page, and you can go down there, excuse me, and click through to those sources, and you can definitely cite those sources that are listed there. So the relevance, and what else would make something relevant or irrelevant? It's a tough one, but if something written for one audience and you're trying to apply it for another audience, you might want to make sure that it is relevant in that way. Something written for children, let's say, may not be relevant in the way it's presented or needs to be presented for adults. So you just have to keep in mind, does it relate to the topic? Is the audience of the text appropriate? Is it of an appropriate level of sophistication, demand, that sort of thing? And so keep that in mind. So that is R for relevance. The next is A for authority, and I'd say this is probably, of course, a very important piece of information that maybe goes back to relevance a little bit. So authority looks at the source of the information, but it's really more the people behind the source of the information. Basically, who's the author, publisher, source, or sponsor? Is it an individual? Are they a person of acknowledged expertise, that sort of thing? So what are their credentials, their organizational affiliations, whether or not the author, the organization is qualified to write on the topic, and is there contact information? We always like to have that contact information for follow-up. And this is, I think, where a lot of people dismiss Wikipedia as a source that lacks authority, because the authors, publishers, are normal people who have a particular interest. I will say most studies show that Wikipedia information is pretty darn accurate. It is pretty hard to keep inaccurate information up there. And but the problem is just there is no single authoritative voice behind it, and even the creator of Wikipedia says that it should not be used as a source, as a citation. It is a great place to get background information that can help you dig deeper into things, but you want to be careful about that. So it's good, like I just said in the relevance comments, that you can scroll down to the bottom of your Wikipedia page and find all the various sources, click through to those, read those, because that is the authoritative source that has been used and vetted and accepted as a good source of information. One thing you can do when doing website searches to get more authoritative stuff or less unauthoritative, that might be the better way to say it, is when you do your search terms, let's just say, college level writing, you might want to then put following that the word cite, S-I-T-E, followed by a colon, and then edu, gov, org, whatever, and then that will bring up only those sorts of sources. So if you do college level writing, I think that's what I just said, followed by the word cite, colon, and the word, or the .edu, or you don't need the dot, just the edu or gov or org or whatever. It'll bring up only sites that end in that sort of domain. So you'll be getting less .com type stuff, less of the sort of websites that are trying to sell you something. So that's a good search strategy to winnow out some of the junk, but you still have to, I'd say, apply the CRAAP test to whatever you find there. So the next A, so that's authority. The next A is accuracy. So how reliable, truthful, or correct is the content? And of course, sometimes you just don't know, so you have to compare it to other things you have come across, and maybe you'll need to reconcile some things. So again, we go back to authority in some respect, as where does the information come from? How well is it supported by evidence? Has it been reviewed or refereed? And that's what we think of in an academic journal. It will have gone through what is called a peer review process, but that's considered refereed. In that, other people who know a lot about the topic will have read and responded and critiqued and said it's okay, but what about this, or it's not okay because of that, and it just depends on a lot of different things. So can the information be verified? And I came across a great quote in a link from a Facebook story about how music lyrics are now written at the second and third grade level. And it had a great quote from Randy Weingarten, who is the head of the American Federation of Teachers. And so, but because it was from what I'll just call a rather slipshod publication, and it certainly sounded like something that this woman would have said as the president of the second largest teachers union in America. But I just cannot cite it from that source, so I tried to track it down by I copied her the quote attributed to her, pasted it into Google, and did a search, and I really couldn't find it. And so, I just could not, in good conscience, use that quote because I couldn't track it down. So sometimes when it comes to accuracy, let's just say you find information at a popular news site, whether it's CNN or ABC or NBC News, you want to not so much take that person's quote, but do a search using that person's name and maybe that whole quote, maybe a chunk of that quote, and find out what it is they said, where they said it. This is particularly true when, or important, I should say, when a news website quotes some, expert in the field. Don't trust that news website, but go track down that expert. It shouldn't take too long, and that will make it, more appropriate and give you a more authoritative citation, which goes back to authority. Watch for language and accuracy that is unbiased, objective, free of emotion. Unbiased is probably impossible to achieve, the lack of bias, because we all have our biases. But watch that. Some people are known, not to pick on conservatives, but Rush Limbaugh is known as being bombastic and biased, and the conservatives conservative. So he should be taken with a grain of salt. And for better or worse, I don't know, I can't think of any liberal. Well, Jon Stewart. Okay, so from The Daily Show. He has his liberal bias. I think well, anyway, it depends on your politics and your thinking. But so you want to check on both of those because I think both of them, well, yeah, everybody makes mistakes and everybody's biased, so watch out for that. And another way to just pay attention, though I'm not entirely sure how much I want to think about these, or the spelling, grammar, punctuation, and so on in your source. Does it come across as professional, unprofessional, slipshod, that sort of thing? If it does, you should be a little extra concerned and make sure you can verify that information. So accuracy, it's always good to check, maybe less important at a 100 level, 200 level, but as you move into your junior and senior, and should you go on to graduate programs, this becomes more and more important as you move along. So that's accuracy. And finally is purpose, which is, why does this information even exist? What's the purpose of it? Is it just out there to inform, to teach, to sell, to entertain, to persuade? Some combination of the two. I mentioned Rush Limbaugh and Jon Stewart. Both of them have some kind of overlapping inform, entertain, and persuade. How much they would admit to each of those, I don't really know, and I don't know if we could even measure it if we wanted to. Do the author sponsors, do the people behind the information make their intention or purpose clear? Is this information fact, opinion, propaganda? And propaganda is just really, I think we can use that term rather broadly as an attempt to bring people over to a particular perspective. So it's more strongly intended opinion material. But there's a number of ways to think of it. It obviously goes to the extremes of what many a government will do in order to persuade people to behave as they desire. Okay, So think about it. Some things will be clearly factual, some will be one person's opinion, and some will be promoting a particular agenda, and that agenda can be good or bad. Propaganda can be used for good intention and good purposes, and bad intention and bad purposes. And again, probably that will depend upon your politics about which is which and what is what. But think about that, because as we write about these sorts of things I talk about, even the Declaration of Independence is a piece of propaganda intended to sway supporters of the American Revolution to the cause, to get the fence sitters off the fence and maybe to choose what they saw as the right side, and to put the opposition on warning. And so it's a great document, an incredible piece of writing, but we can look at it as propaganda and not be demeaning in any way. Okay, and this gets to this notion, does the point of view appear objective and impartial? Again, is that even possible? Is it better to be open and above board about biases and impartiality and that sort of thing? So, is it better to be honest and say, I am a liberal and this is what I think from the liberal perspective and blah, blah, blah? Or should I attempt to appear objective about something and perhaps be deceptive in that way, hiding my agenda? So that gets to political, ideological, cultural, religious, institutional, personal biases. How evident are they? How much do they matter? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It'll just depend. But you just want to think about these things. They don't, because there are biases. I don't think there is anything inherently wrong with bias, because we all have our biases. But you want to be able to become aware of them and take them into account. So that is purpose, and that is the P of the CRAAP test: currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. And so if you go through and think of these concerns every time you evaluate information, you think about them and how they influence the information presented, the content within that, the perspective offered, you will be making a smarter decision with regard to the information you'll be including in your papers. So that's rather long, but hopefully helpful. And as always, if you've got questions, you got to let me know. Bye-bye.